Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay were the first people to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Hillary said, "It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." And what this means is that true victory lies not merely in reaching a goal or overcoming an external challenge, but in surpassing our internal limitations and fears, building resilience and continually growing as individual. And it's my pleasure to welcome Verity Price, who too achieved some firsts in her life. Hi, Verity.
Hello, Louise. Lovely to be here.
I'm so glad that you've joined us today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So, Verity started her journey as the first South African musician with the tenacious foresight to get online crowdfunding for an album she hadn't even recorded yet. I've not heard your music, Verity. I'd love to. I must get to hear it. She was also the first speaker from Africa to ever be crowned the world champion of public speaking and the sixth woman in history. Wow, that is such an achievement. And we South Africans are so proud of you.
Thank
Well,
you.
so Verity's talent for acting out of the box rather than merely thinking out of the box has brought international success for her. She's been speaking globally on innovation and thinking differently and has 2 TEDx Talks. As the Toastmasters 2021 world champion, Verity captured the judges and thousands of people's imagination with her winning speech, A Great Read. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go and watch A Great Read. An inspiring invitation to improve our lives by writing a different story. Helping people to do just that is Verity's passion. She has a degree in psychology and anthropology from the University of Cape Town. She is an accredited De Bono Six Thinking Hats facilitator and an advocate for positive psychology. Verity believes passionately that change happens when teams have the confidence to create new ideas. She has crafted speeches and workshops to grow this ability with measurable exponential success over the last decade. Wow, you really have achieved so much in your time.
Oh gosh, when you hear it like that, it does sound like a lot, but it is over time. So it's the small steps that add up to a long bio.
Well, we've all been around for, well, not all of us, but I've been around a long time, and I don't think my bio reads as well as that. So, welcome. So, today we're talking about overcoming failure. So, I'd like to ask you some small mistake you've made, some small failure, something that's not too significant. Could you share something like that with us?
Gosh, when you ask me about failures, it's so easy to think of the big ones. So I'm trying to think of a small failure. Well, what comes to mind, Lois, is it was an experience I had many years ago. I was opening for a top speaker, Robin Banks, big South African motivational speaker in Johannesburg. And he gave me this rock star welcome, and the crowd went wild, and he was going wild. And my ego at that point was like, wow, this is it. Look at me, I'm making it. And I had my little headset on. I was still singing at that point, and I was there to talk to them about the album that I was crowdfunding. It was an incredible opportunity. So I had heightened emotions. I felt excited, and I ran up on stage like nothing could stop me. And as I reached the last step, I tripped and I fell flat on my face in front of 700 people. And there was this collective gasp of all of them horrified. I mean, that's part of why people don't want to ever get on stage. What if I fall on my face? And I was lying there looking at the stage, winded. But over the years, I'd had some amazing coaches who'd been preparing me for moments like that when things go wrong. And that work just kicked in because in that moment, I just looked around at these horrified people and I said, well, I can only go up from here. And I stood up, I dusted myself off, I spoke from the heart, and I had an incredible experience with that audience. And so it was a beautiful example of how the way we experience failure really determines how we recover from it. And because I'd been trained by a singing coach to just keep going when things went wrong, I just got up, I laughed at myself and got on with it. And that's a failure I'm particularly proud of.
And what I love what you've just said, I always talk about pick yourself. I've got my Pliffim formula, and I talk about
Mm,
pick yourself up and laugh. And we forget
yes.
to laugh. We
Mm,
get so worried about what do people think, and we get embarrassed and ashamed, and we feel terrible that we forget that there is a funny side to that falling down, to that failure.
yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned the laughing side of it.
Yes.
So, how did you feel? I mean, how did you actually feel after you had that failure? And how did you feel when you picked yourself up?
In that moment, I think what I often share that story when I'm teaching people public speaking and building confidence, because what I felt at the end of that was that I finally understood what confidence really is. And I truly believe that confidence in anything that you're doing is the ability to be okay with things not being okay. Because the one thing you're guaranteed is things are always not going to be okay, but can you be okay regardless of what happens? And so it was a really proud moment for me where I could pat myself on the back and go, wow, you've come a long way that you can fall flat on your face in front of 700 people. Because
Physically.
I used to fake having a temperature to get out of reading at school. I was that scared of being in front of people. So it had been a journey to have that confidence. But the fact that it had gone wrong and I had complete permission to fail publicly, to, as you say, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, have a good laugh, and realized it didn't kill me. I'd actually created more connection with the audience than if everything had gone according to plan. But why it worked was I had been okay with the fact that I'd fallen over, and I hadn't seen it as an indictment of who I was or that I wasn't good enough. It was like, oh well, I fell over, and like a child, just carry on. So at the end, the feeling for me was like, oh wow, I've just experienced what confidence is. I know I'll be okay even after something not okay has happened to me.
Well, one comment and one question. I've read somewhere that people fall on purpose so that they can use that as a demonstration in their talks.
Yes, I have heard that.
So the question is, how did you build your confidence?
Oh, so there's a few things that have gone into building my confidence because it was broken at 14. I was a very confident little girl. I wanted to be an actress. I shared that with everyone who would listen. And then I got the lead in the school play and discovered that people don't like you very much when you get the lead in the school play. And I had a really rough year. And by the end of that year, I vowed never to be in front of people again. I just sat at the back, played it small, and I used to put thermometers into cups of tea to fake a temperature to get out of being in front of the school. So it really was, even though I was quite an extroverted, confident person, my confidence in myself to put myself out there was limited. And there was a few things that happened. The big pivotal point for me was losing my father when I was 24. And I think at that point, I was in my 20s. I thought I was invincible. I thought life was infinite. And suddenly my dad was gone. And it really forced me to look at my life and where I was letting fear hold me back, where I wasn't taking chances. And so, in his memory, and to push myself into action, 6 months after he died, I walked the Camino to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And I have to say that was the start of building confidence. The fact that I could look at a map every day and go, I've traveled this far, because we don't get to do that in our lives sometimes. You don't feel the progress you're making. So, physically making progress across a country was hugely empowering for me, and it gave me the confidence to come back to South Africa, to start pursuing singing, to finding my voice. And then I worked with a coach in the US named Joe, who used to make everything that could go wrong go wrong. And he was the reason why when I fell over 6 years later, I was totally fine because he trained me. He would turn up the music, down the music, shout at me, knock things over. And he got me to be comfortable with things being uncomfortable. So I really attribute walking across Spain by myself at 25 and then working with this incredible coach at 27 as being two experiences and a person that really shaped that confidence. And then just showing up and taking another step in the direction of my dreams built my confidence.
It's so important to have that support, to have that person or people in your life who are there to motivate, encourage, train, and just generally support you. That's
Yes.
very important. And what you were saying is all the examples of the loud noise, all the mistakes that could go wrong. It's all about the resilience, building up your resilience and your resistance to those issues if and when they do occur. So resilience comes through hardship.
Yeah.
That's how we build our
Unfortunately,
resilience.
there's no easy way to get there.
So you've had a fantastic journey, especially in your speaking career. What about any failures that you've had on the way?
Look, there's been a lot on a personal perspective, and again, it's how you frame it, whether it's a failure or not. I didn't crack it as a musician. I crowdfunded an album, 2,000 people in 25 countries bought it. I recorded it. I poured everything into it. I released it, and it went nowhere. It got a lot of play on Algoa FM. That's the only radio station that played me, and I had to encounter my ego's reaction to not getting what I thought I deserved.
Did you
I
give up
really felt
music?
I
Did you
did
give up music?
eventually. No, I did eventually, but I really had to face that for me, the humiliation of I've told everyone I'm going to do this thing, I've done so much. But because of the crowdfunding, all that happened was people were like, please come and speak at our conference, tell us about innovation. And I'd go, well, can I bring my band? And they'd say, no, don't need to hear your music. We want to hear about how we disrupt our thinking. And so it was really tough because in many ways that was a failure. But the lesson that I gleaned from it, and after a long bout of depression and anxiety, so it wasn't like I didn't jump out of it. It really confronted me. I felt ashamed. I felt really lost for a long time. And then the speaking kept coming. I kept getting work to speak, to teach innovation. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. This wasn't my plan. And I suddenly saw the distinction between the fact that your ego will always have a plan for you of what it thinks your life's meant to look like, and your soul might have a different plan. And when I started realizing that my music not taking off wasn't a failure, it was actually just opening a door for my soul to let me speak, to teach, to help other people, that experience of the failure fell away and it stopped feeling so hard. It was like, well, the music was a door. It wasn't an end result. It literally was a station in my journey, but it took me years to have the grace to see it that way.
Do you miss the music?
Funnily enough, not really, because I still perform. I'm with audiences all the time. I often sing one song at the end of a talk. The songs stopped coming. I mean, I was an avid songwriter and they switched off in 2010. Best song I ever wrote was the last song I ever wrote. And then my mum died. I did another Camino to commemorate her. And I walked away from singing in that walk. The first one walked me into music, and the last one walked me out. And I know now that I'm doing my soul's work. And when I had the grace to trust that, and I found I didn't see it as a failure, I just saw it as a stepping stone.
Trust. It's about having trust in your own abilities and your own innate character. How did you find that trust?
Oh, with a lot of wailing. My brother-in-law used to joke that there was a Verity-sized dent in their couch. I would sit on the couch and why is my life so hard? So it as I said, it wasn't always very gracious, but the trust came through taking action. So I did a lot of, and that's why I've become so passionate about positive psychology. That when my life was at its lowest point, my music career hadn't worked out, another relationship had failed. I was living in my sister and brother-in-law's spare bedroom, 40. There was a lot of things to feel like I was failing. Didn't have children, never been married, all the things that like my fairy tale version of life hadn't happened. When I started taking positive action, I did a thing called the 100 Happy Days Challenge on Facebook, one happy picture a day for 100 days. I started practicing gratitude. Those things started building my trust. It improved my perspective and my outlook. And I started trusting that if I was meant to be anywhere different, I would be. And that's when I started co-creating my life. I let go of thinking what it should look like. And I actively showed up every day to go, how can I make this a happy day, a good day? The rest of it come as it needs to. And that's when my life turned around.
Was there one specific incident or thought or action that made you get up off that couch?
I think pride. I think pride of not wanting, especially when relationships end, sometimes like the best revenge is looking good and getting on with it. And there'd been some interesting criticisms thrown at me about the fact that I would never make proper money. I would never do anything with my life. I was going to be a burden on whoever ended up with me. It was tough stuff to listen to as a woman in my late 30s going into my 40s. And it was good. I call it the FU factor, and people can fill in the gaps what the F stands for. But there was something very powerful about that FU. I'm going to show you that I can turn my life around. And so I'm extremely grateful for the criticism because it activated my pride, which I know is seen as not a great emotion. But sometimes it's just you need anger or you need something to get you off the couch and then move it in a positive direction. So yeah,
So
criticism
speak,
and pride and wanting to show someone that I could turn my life around.
so speak to me about criticism. What sort of criticism did you get and how did you handle it? How did you manage it?
It was a toxic situation that I was in, and it was mainly about my ability to provide and my ability to, because my music had failed and I was trying to make money here and there. It was very much saying that I was going to be a financial burden on anybody who was with me. And then when everything ended and I found myself living in my sister's spare bedroom, that was another like, this is how bad it is. You can't even afford your own place and you're nearly 40. And so it really tested my sense of who I was, the value that I had to offer, but it also fueled me to start shifting how I felt because I didn't have control over what work I was or wasn't going to get, but I did know I had control over how I was feeling. And that's when starting positive daily practices upped my energy. I started noticing opportunities and then work started happening. So it was like I had to turn it into something positive before any positive results could show up.
So, what advice can you give to anybody who's living in their sister's spare bedroom?
Say thank you. that's that's where it starts. And that was what I spoke about in the World Championships. Pick up your pen, write a different story, look for the good in where you find yourself, and find the good in the ugly as well. Like I had to things that weren't working. Isn't that great? This is teaching me something. This is stretching me. This is growing me because when you say thank you, when you notice what's working, that fuels you. It gives you energy to take the next step. Because we don't spend our whole lives in spare bedrooms, but sometimes they're a resting moment. And when I really got grateful for that, and grateful that I wasn't in a relationship that didn't serve me, and grateful that I was 40 and could start with a clean slate and anything was possible, that's when everything became possible.
It's your positive psychology. What if it's just not working?
And true enough, I mean, there's times when it might not work, but then look at, are you pushing into something your ego thinks you need? Or should you be listening to that quieter voice of your soul? Because I paddled upstream in the music industry for 9 years, and it wasn't working. It wasn't where I was meant to be. And sometimes falling over and really just letting go for a bit and resetting, whatever that looks like. For me, it was walking hundreds of kilometers across countries. But whatever that reset looks like, sometimes you'll come back and go, I'm actually pushing at something that's not what's meant for me.
And how do you find out what is meant for you?
I like that you're asking me the hard questions. I think you have to be curious. You have to, they talk about following the breadcrumbs. What are the things that are lighting up your soul? Where are you getting positive energy? Can you do more of that? And at the lowest point in 2010, 2011, that was when I joined Toastmasters as an organization. I joined for fun. I didn't know where my life was going. The singing wasn't working. I was doing a little bit of speaking, but not really. But Toastmasters gave me community, it gave me belonging. I got involved in the leadership of the club. I started helping them with their website. And at a time when didn't have direction, I found direction in volunteering. I had no idea that 10 years later I would become a world champion because I joined that. It wasn't obvious when I started, but I got good energy from being at those meetings. So go and find the things that afterwards you feel full. If it's a walk or a running group or whatever it is, if you can't control the big stuff, those little things, I believe every single one of us has in our control because it shifts your energy. And over time, that leads to bigger shifts.
Community. So you mentioned the word community. So important. Goes back to that support group, having somebody you can talk to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
100%.
did you share your fears and your concerns at the time with anybody?
I did. My close family and friends knew I was someone who was often quite vocal in feeling that stuff was unfair. The really deep stuff, I think I probably did keep quite close to my heart. But my sister and my brother, I had a few people in my corner, and I don't think you need more than that. I think you need to know these people are in my corner, they've got me. And that was where I shared what I was really struggling with.
So would you advise people that you should share?
They say a problem shared is a problem halved. It depends who you share it with. So I think there has to be a provisor there, because sometimes we don't realize that I saw that in my previous relationship. I would share a fear and it would get used against me in a later conversation. And that was when I started to go, not everyone is a safe space to share. But but where you can have somewhere to speak and to get it off your mind, it also creates space for new thinking to emerge. But it depends on who you share it with.
Create space. I always say that when you speak, whether you speak privately or to the world at large, you're actually sharing that problem with the universe, and it's taking some of the angst away.
I love that. Exactly. And it's always to go, and this is the Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. It's very easy to get caught in the negativity, the black hat, and the emotional, the red hat. What we need to do is, when we've shared, move on to what he calls the green hat, which is, how am I going to move forward with this? What am I going to do differently? Because for years, I just spiraled with talking about the problem. It was only when I shifted that to taking creative action that my life changed. So share it with the intention of solution will come, a way forward will become apparent.
We hope that happens every time.
Yes, yeah, one
It
can
doesn't
hope.
always happen every
No,
time.
no.
And any other failures that you could share with us? Or mistakes? It doesn't have to be a failure, a mistake that you may have made.
Gosh, they've definitely been, there's definitely been plenty. What I can share, whether it's a failure or a mistake or there was a lesson in it, was when I joined Toastmasters and discovered they had speaking competitions. I entered in 2012, and my sister Kay beat me at the little club level contest, and she went on to go to the world semifinals. So it was a big thing. She did really, really well. And I was so affronted by her success, and I was so envious that I was, sitting at the back of the room wishing she would lose. And I discovered a not pleasant side of myself, of like really, and it actually made me, I started getting sick from how badly I felt, so bad about how I felt about her success. And then eventually I shared it with her. We talk about sharing. I actually was honest, and we found this beautiful space to connect and heal it. And then I could support her journey. But as a result of that experience, I didn't enter contests because I didn't want to lose. And then I eventually entered 3 years later, and I only got as far as the Western Cape. When I say only, for someone else, that would be amazing. But again, my ego was like, this is embarrassing, don't do this. So I didn't enter for 6 years. And then when I did enter in 2021, I'd grown and changed enough to really work differently on those contests. And I was very lucky to win the World Championships. And I believe that the timing was perfect. But I do look back at all the years I didn't compete because I didn't want to not win. And I see that as a failure of character, which I don't think I'm alone in struggling with. But I wonder how much more I would have grown as a speaker and as a person because I see people, they show up every year, regardless of the result. And it took me 10 years to figure out that you must show up for the growth, not for the result. So that's just a character failure of mine, that trying to like keep safe, stay in my, I say act out the box, but in that case, it was like I stayed in my box for a long time.
So how do we overcome that envy that stops us from being competitive?
Oh, the speaking about it definitely helped. Yeah, for me, it was a time game. But what I did do, which has made a difference for me now, is every year I didn't compete, I helped other people that were competing. So I was in the contest as a coach, as a mentor, as a support. And that I also learned through watching other people's resilience and supporting them. So that was another way from the sidelines to build up my confidence for when I did finally do the full competition. So I don't know if that's a strategy, but that helped me helping other people succeed. And suddenly I realized there's space for everyone, and you're actually only ever competing against your last performance.
So true. And yes, there is space for everyone, and we all get our turn at some point or other. You get that opportunity and you create that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what advice can you give anybody who's facing some kind of a challenge or adversity?
So I think what I will give are the three principles in positive psychology that make a huge difference. They say that only 25% of your success comes from your IQ and your skills, and 75% comes from these three attributes. The one is to work on your optimism levels. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with gratitude, saying thank you, noticing what's working. Thank you for the challenges. Thank you how I'm growing, because that just starts to open up your mind to notice what's working rather than fixate on what's not. The second thing to work on is looking at the obstacle as an opportunity. What's the opportunity here? How can I learn? How can I work around this? If anything was possible, how would I solve this? So really shifting perception around whatever the problem is. The third one, which is crucial, and we've spoken about it already, is community. Who are the people that are in my corner that I feel safe with, who are going to support my growth, and who are external people? Is it getting a coach? Is it going to a group? Or what can I put in place that will give me that social support that is so key to a brain that stays positive and focused on what's working? Those social connections are going to be key. And even if it's one person who's significant and whose love you feel, that boosts your optimism levels. They will help you see the opportunity and the obstacle. So those are my three things they've made a difference for me, but positive psychologists have been studying this for 2 decades. And those are the three things that make the difference.
So the first step is to build up that optimism. What about dealing with the emotions, the let's call them negative emotions that you experience once you've hit that wall, once you've had that fall? You obviously shame, blame, fear, embarrassment, uh, anger, all of those emotions. What do you do with those emotions?
You have to feel them. Like all emotions are, I see this, I've got a 5-year-old, all emotions are valid, but emotions are like the weather. And I stand corrected on the number, but as far as I understand it, the longest any emotion can last in your body is about 67 seconds. There might be a slightly different number, but it's a chemical release. The reason you keep feeling it is you keep thinking about it. So, one of the most powerful ways to deal with emotions is to name it. I'm angry. I'm frustrated, but don't explain it. I'm angry because they did this. And the more you explain it, the more you give yourself another dose of anger or frustration. And so, really naming it, sometimes just feeling it in your body, going, where is this anger? What's in my hands? Just feeling it. I find those things of getting present, allowing the emotion, not judging it, not justifying it, but feeling it, it will pass. In the same way, a child goes from a screaming tantrum to ice cream. Like you think they've got a personality disorder. No, they just are able to process the emotions quicker. So feel the emotion, don't numb it, don't shove it down. And I do that at times. We're all human. When you just feel it and then go, what's the next thing I could do that's going to bring my emotions up? What will make me feel one step better? Because you can't go from, devastation to exhilaration in one step. But what's the next best thing I can do? And if it's get a cup of tea, phone a friend, whatever it is, help someone, those little things start to shift the emotions. So don't shove them under a carpet because they will find a way to come out.
Although it's important, though, to understand that those emotions may be there for a reason, to
Mm,
give you time to process whatever it is that you need to process.
yeah,
So the anger, it might be just to give you time to realize that there's some other learning to be had.
100%. And they're a wonderful gauge of, yeah, where am I at and what's triggered this? When else does this come up? So that self-reflection, I often find journaling is very useful.
Very powerful journaling for a lot of reasons, also because sometimes when you journal, you think I'm not progressing. But if you look back in your journal and you see 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, wow, I always say rate your anger. So you say I'm a 10, now I'm only a 4. Gosh, I have improved, and so it
Yeah.
helps you understand that your journey of recovery is definitely on the up. So
Yes, 100%.
journaling, all of those things. You spoke about gratitude. Gratitude is so important. And I think today everybody keeps gratitude journals.
Yep. Yeah.
Very important. I like that idea of that 100 days of happiness.
Yes, it's a wonderful website, 100happydays.com. And you just do it. You do it for yourself. I've done it about 4 or 5 times in my life, and it's been a wonderful, happy habit to get into.
That brings us to another topic, habit.
Yes.
How important is habit?
Well, they say we are what we repeatedly do. So, excellence is a habit. So I think happy habits, positive habits are really important. It's frightening how easily we get into bad habits and negative habits. But I do think it's what are the things you do on a daily basis that are improving your life that we should focus on. How do I make that a habit? So that
Give
for me, I
me,
do think habits are important, but I'm not always very good at having the right habits. I've got a lot of bad habits.
give me an example of a good habit, a good positive habit.
So good positive habits, waking up every morning and giving thanks before you get out of bed, going, I'm so lucky I've got this warm bed. I'm so, whatever it is, but just really starting in that. I do it at the end of every day with my little boy when I put him to bed. What were the 3 best things that happened for you today? What made you smile? What made you laugh? What did you learn? And I hope that I'm embedding in him a habitual ability to reflect on what was positive in a day. So those are little things. As I say, it's very easy to fall out of them when you get busy. So I certainly don't sit here going, I've got this waxed. But when I remember and I catch myself, I can bring those daily positive rituals in, and they do make a difference.
How do you help other people? What do you do to support others?
Professionally or just generally?
Professionally and generally.
So professionally, I'm a speaking coach. So I work with individuals and teams, helping them to present and to find their confidence. And it's incredibly rewarding just to hold a space for someone to find their voice and to tell their stories. And I really, really love that. On a personal level, I'm someone who's, if you need me and you're on the other end of the phone, I am there, but not as present as I would love to be. I have a small child, I travel. So definitely, like, my small nucleus gets a lot of my attention. I'm not as present a friend as I used to be when I was single and had time. But if there's something big that needs to happen, then I get excited with helping plan surprise parties, those kind of things. That's where I definitely find my creative outlet. But I must say, life gets quite small when you've got small children. It's like just focused on him and his friends. And so I give a lot of support to my fellow moms.
So what's next for Verity?
I'm letting it unfold, to be honest. I'm loving the work I do. I love the people that I meet. I'm hoping to get a little bit more balance, so I'm at home more. I do work from home a lot of the time, so I'm present to my son, but also just working on, there's a little less travel. There's a lot of international travel, so it keeps me very busy. So my focus is always going, how do I find the balance and still serve? But there's no big, I've got a book I need to finish writing, but when time allows, I'm taking the pressure off and I'm showing up and I'm serving where I'm needed.
I'm sure I'm looking forward to the book.
So am I. I hope it writes itself while I'm sleeping.
So, Verity, what is the last piece of advice you can give somebody who's facing some kind of failure?
If you can, reframe it. I was running a course this morning, actually, and one of the delegates said, fail, all it stands for is first attempt in learning. And if you can look at that failure, this was my first attempt, or maybe it's my 10th attempt and I keep getting it wrong, I need to change my strategy. But it's about how you frame it. It's only a failure if you call it that. You can change its name to stepping stone and go, what's this a stepping stone to? And focus on that, because that's when I believe your soul will start giving you the breadcrumbs you need to follow.
Absolutely. I love that. It's really about taking that first step, reframing, refocusing, and redirecting your energies into something more positive.
100%.
How can people contact you, Verity?
They can find me on my website, verityprice.com, and on social media at Verity Price Speaks. And I'm always sharing tips and tricks on how to find your voice, share your story, and present with power. It's my passion.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. And everyone, you can contact me. The detail is below. I'll give you a free 30-minute discussion on how to take those first steps after having after experiencing a failure. And please do watch my channel, Walking Without Skin. There's a lot of interviews, a lot of tips, a lot of stories about overcoming failure. And so please do subscribe, and please do join and watch the various videos. Verity, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, love.